Get started, please. For some reason, everybody's hanging around the back table. All right, let me ask you to turn in your notebook to page 17. It's 17 in mine. I don't know if it's in yours or not. Probably about the same. Conclusions. I'm going to take a few minutes to review. Is it 21? That many different pages added to it? I guess I've got an old book. That's what happens. I don't like to change because I written all over it. Okay. Our objective in the course was to probably a number of such objectives, but one basic thing or theme would be that we're looking at Gnosticism, and we will cover that in subsequent chapters, but Gnosticism has influenced Christianity to such a degree that the whole objective of Christianity is to get people prepared to go to heaven when they die. And there's nothing wrong with that in itself, but that misses the point of the Bible. And so the purpose of this course is to hopefully kind of redirect our attention and focus us back with a biblical perspective. And in a few weeks, we will spend a couple of 3 or 4 weeks, however long it takes, looking specifically at Jesus' perspective of heaven and earth. And so I would kind of like for us to adopt basically the same attitude or viewpoint that Jesus himself had. I think that if Jesus showed up at most of our teaching sessions in Christianity today, he would not understand or see what it was that we were talking about. Well, he would start over. I'm sure he would start at the basics and go from there. But the focus, the simple thing is the focus has changed. And that has, in my estimation, gotten the perspective of Christianity focused. We wouldn't say necessarily it's an error or something wrong. It's just a major and a minor, so to speak. And so we want to work on changing that perspective. One of those things we started out with in the course was looking at this idea that from Genesis 1, Bereshit, that in the beginning God created heaven and earth, two distinct realms. In Isaiah said, heaven is, God spoke through Isaiah to say, heaven is my throne, earth is my footstool. We see in that delineation. Jesus, after he was resurrected on the Mount of Olives, he ascended and he left earth and went into heaven. So he transferred out of the realm that we're accustomed to and entered into a distinctly different realm, heaven. And the promise, some angelic beings, they must have met when they must have done something like that, because a couple of guys was coming down while he was going up, I guess. And they said to the guys that it was like me in Manhattan. You know, I'm sitting there looking up. And they said, what are you guys standing here looking up for? This one that's been taken into heaven will return in what? Just the same way or something to that effect. So the promise then is that at some juncture in human history, Jesus, some bright morning, Jesus is, or maybe evening, I don't know, Jesus is going to descend out of heaven and plant his feet solidly on earth again. So we're talking about two different realms. Now, I maintain that man originally was, in the original creation, had the capacity to function as well in heaven as in earth. That man was the coupling device between heaven and earth. And that God's manifestation on the planet earth, and in all the animal kingdom, we brought Cherie with us tonight. So God's manifestation to Cherie was through mankind, or to all the critters, whoever, whatever they are. So when man sinned and became self-oriented, knew good and evil relative to himself, then he lost that capacity. He was judged and lost that capacity, and was therefore anchored on earth with only limited, if any, adventures into the heavenly realm. And now we talk about the depravity of the soul. That's a theological term, I suppose. But the reality of that concept is that I was born with my feet on the ground, but my head not reaching heaven. I need, in order for me to dabble into this thing that we call heaven, I needed assistance. And I was about 30 years old before I received any assistance of that nature. I was granted a special guide that came along and said, this is how you do that. His name is Jesus. I met him and was introduced to this other realm that I thought it was something they had in the comic books. People laughed and made jokes about. And if you got a little older, which I wasn't then, but I am now, it was the place, the happy place where dead people go. So we always say, well, he's in a better place. That's what we say, isn't it? Poor old Joe, he's in a better place. So I don't know. So the happy place where dead people go. Now that's really classical Gnosticism is what that is. New Age people call it entering into a realm of higher what? Higher consciousness. That's Gnosticism. And by the way, that's Christianity. Ooh! Can we believe that? That's Christianity. That's what Christianity is all about. Pardon? I don't know. Did they? Pardon? Well, I don't think they're in agreement with me on much anything. Or I'm not in agreement with them. I guess that would be more proper. And I challenge you to reorient your thought. Now, every one of you here tonight, I believe, are believed to be born again in the Holy Spirit. You've followed Jesus. Where do you expect to spend eternity? Well, with Jesus. Okay, that's good. Where do you expect that to be? Right here. Right here. Right here. Now, it may be a new earth, and you might be in a city or actually you are the city, New Jerusalem, and it is planted on the new earth. So here's where we're destined to be here. So forget the idea that we're going to escape and get away from this. Oh, it's pretty tough. Well, we are Americans. It's not that tough, is it? Now, if you were born in most parts of the world, you might say, well, it's pretty tough going, pretty tough sledding. But I tell you, I'm getting to be an old dude, and I don't know about tough. Well, I grew up in the hill country back in Kentucky, kicking rocks in my bare toes and stuff, and that felt pretty tough. Milking a bunch of cows twice a day. Chopping weeds out of tobacco, I felt that was pretty tough. But it really wasn't that bad, was it? Because I don't know in my life if I've ever felt that I was lacking a meal. Are you? How about you? I don't know. Now, I fasted purposely, but I mean, I don't know. And gosh, we're so good, selling off the world as misery. I don't know. That doesn't sell good for Americans. Now, a lot of folks in their world might agree with it, but I don't think so. Anyway, God created you to function here. God created you to function here. And if I die today, and to be absent would be from the body to be present with the Lord. He's in heaven. I'll be in heaven. I hope. I hope he doesn't say, I hope he doesn't say that. I don't think he will. He hasn't said that so far. And I've done plenty that he would say, all right, that's enough. You're through. But he didn't. Graceful. But when you die and you check out, you leave space-time. And so I'm convinced that at that juncture, we no longer will gauge sequence in terms of time like we do now. So we met at 7:30. We're going to quit in a couple hours. We're going to go to our home. Going to get up in the morning. Going to do so and so. We judge everything in terms of time. I think we're going to judge everything in terms of event. So it's appointed once for man to die, and after that, the event of judgment. Assuming that we're judged faithful to be joined to Jesus eternally, then where he is, we will be, and his next assignment here will be Jerusalem. And if we're with them, then our next assignment, the next event will be Jerusalem. So I think that, now you don't have to buy this, this is my view. I think the instant that I die, the next event I'll be conscious of is standing before the Lord in judgment. And the next thing I'll be conscious of is descending in Jerusalem. And this Catholic concept of time is just trying to map Earth time onto eternity. Doesn't work. That's where you come up with these stupid ideas. What is it called? Purgatory. Yeah, that's trying to superimpose space-time onto heaven, onto something that doesn't have the time element. So we said then there's two realms, heaven and earth. I represented them, and I know you missed seeing this, so I'll write it again. As the sum of all points, x, y, z, and that's all, anything you can grasp is your five senses. And if I add time, space-time. So that's earth. And then we just made up one. We called it P, Q, R, and we don't know how many more dimensions we might, but we're suspicious that there's 7 of them. And we're going to call that heaven. So another realm. And we developed the concept that modern physicists have, in my estimation, stumbled upon the reality that there exist other realms beyond space-time. And we went to a lot of trouble to talk about photons that were interconnected. What do we call them? There's a word for it, and I forgot. Entangled photons. Forgot the word. Entangled photons that prove, and entangled photons just I mean, the real guys that really know what they're doing just scratch their head and say, this could not be, and yet it is. And what it means is that these entangled photons are exhibiting traits that indicate that they're operating somewhere beyond space-time. Now, not necessarily heaven, because we don't know. But we know that they're operating outside of space-time. Because one of the contributions, again, this is 20th century physics, that Einstein developed the concepts of relativity, and we talked about the discontinuity in, you know it with sound, in air. You break the sound barrier, there's a discontinuity at the speed of sound in air. And there's also in nature a discontinuity in the travel speed that's possible, and the speed of light is considered that discontinuity, according to Einstein's theory, which have been confirmed over and over and over again, that nothing travels faster than the speed of light. And so with entangled photons, things are traveling faster than the speed of light. They're instantaneous in space-time. And so nothing can be instantaneous. So therefore, they're wobbling out, somehow wobbling out of space-time, getting into another arena. We don't know if that's heaven or not. It's just another arena. So it was interesting to me that scientists now have stumbled onto the fact that there exist other realms, whether we know what they are or not, they're out there. And that's just exactly what the Bible portrays. And we developed the idea that there is supposed to be a ladder. How do you spell ladder? Is that right? There's supposed to be a ladder between the two. Jacob saw it in a vision, Genesis 28, and Jesus said, look, folks, I'm the ladder. You'll see the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man. John 1:50 something, 51, I don't know, whatever it is. As Jesus is, so are we in the world. Somebody else said that, didn't he? Okay. All right. So if Jesus is a ladder, now what does that mean? It means that we're the coupling between heaven and earth, once again. Just exactly what we believe Adam was and fell from. And the Lord's restoring in through us. Through primarily Jesus, obviously, and us as we're associated with Jesus. I don't think that you'll mistake me for Jesus, but just in case. Just in case, I thought I'd point it out. Hardly anyone does. Now, everybody see what I'm talking about? Okay. Now, last week, we looked through example after example after example where the Bible actually records people and entities, I should say perhaps, going to and from. We had a bunch of... the one that I like the best, I think, is the one in, where is it? 2 Kings 6, 16, 17, something like that. I don't know. Somebody might look it up. I didn't bring my book with me tonight. Elisha is taking a nap. Actually, it's overnight. His servant gets up in the morning, and he goes outside and stretches before he gets his coffee and biscuits, and he sees Syrian chariots circling the town. Is that 6:17, 2 Kings? I don't know. What is it? I don't know. Try me again.
It's 6:15, Kings 6:15.
Somebody got that? Would you read it, please? Somebody read that, please.
Now
Okay, that's good. That's pretty good, isn't it? That's what you always want. You know, I don't know. I don't tell you how many times over here over the years at fellowship I'd pray, "Oh Lord, Sunday morning's coming. I want to really put some fear of God in these folks. Give me some of those fire around the rafters." Man, he didn't think that was practical. So, anyway, that's kind of it. You ever think about? Anybody ever hear about the coming struggle or battle at Har-Megiddo? And the armies of the nations are going to come up against Israel. And what do you suppose they may see on the mountains of Israel? Same, I think they will. I think that'd be a fearful thing. I always told my sons, they're a little bit older now, so they're not in danger of being drafted probably. I don't even think, I keep my dress blues in the closet ready to go, even though I can't get in them. But anyway, they're in the closet ready to go. And I always told them, if this country is attacked, you should be willing to stand up and defend it. But if this country or any other country you're a part of decides to join in the struggle against Israel and start down into the valley Emek Jehoshaphat, don't go. Do whatever you need to get away. Don't go. Don't end up meeting those chariots of fire on the mountains of Israel, because it's going to be bad. So they crossed over, and Elisha saw it. He understood it. Another one is Elijah himself, Elisha's boss, and he's the only one in history, maybe Enoch perhaps, we don't know about him for sure, but he actually was transported by some sort of conveyance. He was transported for some sort of conveyance from here to here. How do I know he went here? Because 700 years later, he walked back out of here and talked to Jesus with Moses. It's recorded in the Gospels. A cloud came out. Jesus and Peter, John, and James were up there. I think Mount Hermon, and Jesus is praying. I'm thinking, saying, "Lord, what's next?" You ever pray and say, "Lord, what's next?" And then he answered you and said, "Well, are you sure?" Are you sure? I rebuke you, devil. I'm not supposed to have to go there. All right, I don't know. But I think he was praying, saying, "Lord, Father, what's next?" And so Moses, and then the Father says, "Moses, Elijah, you guys come over here, go down there, cross over, step over the divide, and tell them what's next." And they told him what's next. You're going to Jerusalem, and you're going to be crucified there, and because of your death, your blood will be a covering for every single human being that's ever lived. Romans 5:17, 18, somewhere along there. And Jesus, the Bible says, having heard that, they spoke of his death, which would be accomplished in Jerusalem. He come down the mountain and steadfastly set his face to go to Jerusalem. So Moses and Elijah stepped right across the boundary and talked to him. And then they went right back across. So, people come and go. Now, I made the case, I hope I made the case, that all through the Bible, we could track, I don't know how many examples I cited in here. There's many more examples. You remember 3 guys, Abraham had circumcised himself and Ishmael and everybody in the household, and he was sitting at his tent door. He was resting. He was sitting there for a while. And 3 guys show up. And he tells Sarah to fix him a non-kosher meal, by the way. And so they went and did it. She went and did that, or the servants did, or somebody did. And then 2 of the guys were sent out to go to Sodom and Gomorrah. And then Abraham is left talking to God himself. And we might say Jesus, manifestation in the earth, and there are a number of things that we don't know very much about, and that's a possibility. But you see, example after example. I like the one with Samson's mom and dad before Samson was conceived. There's a guy showed up, told them all about Samson. They said, "What's your name?" Said, "Well, you wouldn't understand anyway. I won't tell you." And they said, "Well, make us we'll have a little dinner on the grounds here." And he said, "Well, if you fix it, I won't eat it, but prepare a olah for God." And so I guess they built an altar of some sort, fire on it, and when the fire went up, the guy just stepped in the fire, boom, went out. That's pretty good too, isn't it? Now, Joe and I visited Roswell, Mexico some years ago and tried to ascertain if something really happened there. And the people that now we talked to one guy who was in high school in Roswell, New Mexico, when that's in 47, 48, whatever that year was, the so-called event. And he said it was, and this was the guy owned a Christian TV station, and he was pretty bright, and he did all kinds of good stuff like that. And he's the closest thing to an eyewitness or personal witness to the thing. He says he don't think a thing happened, so I don't know. But I can tell you this: one event in Roswell, New Mexico, real or fabricated, on the map, and we have in the Bible just multiple events, and they all took place within a very short, narrow region. And it's called the West Bank, or Judea and Samaria more properly. By the way, there's another shooting event in Samaria today. A couple of people, I think, were killed. I'm not sure what the death toll was, but it just keeps happening. So you know what the result of that will ultimately have to be? The Israelis will have to get closer and closer to a biblical. They'll say, "You had to get out," and they'll do. You see, we ended up. It's like Jonah. You know the story of Jonah. Jonah knew what the will of God was. He figured he would try to evade it, and he ran for it. And things just worked out where about a day or two in the belly of the whale or whatever it was, a fish. He was praying and saying, "Lord, I think I will do your will. I believe I will obey." And so I won't say the bad word, he vomited on the shore, and Noah went right off to do God's will. Jonah. Jonah went right off to do it. And so I think sometimes the Israelis are kind of that way. Listen, if there were 1.5 billion people sworn to your destruction surrounding you, it'd be kind of tough to be real bold and brave, wouldn't it? You think about that? You know, we're 8,000 miles away, so we can say, "Boy, you Israelis, stand in there. Really, get tough." I think I kind of understand their situation. But they will do the will of God sooner or later in this regard. They will, and we'll talk about that later tonight, hopefully. But I'll get ahead of myself. I think the next two events I think are coming, and I don't have any idea when, but there will be days of great rejoicing when Israel annexes Judea and Samaria and says, "This is our heartland, just the way it is. We don't care what the UN says. We don't care what anybody says. It's our land." Now, everybody that we know in Israel already does that, don't they? Everybody there, that's where they are. So now the other thing is they'll sanctify the Temple Mount. I don't know what they'll do, but all they have to do is go up there and say, "Everybody out, this is our place, this is the holy place. God said, I will establish my name in this place eternally." And that's our position. And this shrine stuff around here is just demonic stuff. It's a high place. They need to say it. They will say it. even if it's from the perspective of the belly of the big fish, they will say it. And brothers and sisters, when they say it, you ain't never seen a revival that's coming. We haven't seen anything yet. Get ready for it. It's going to be marvelous, because in the 50s, in the 40s, 30s and 40s, the evangelical message is God is not dead. That's about all we know, but we just know God is not dead and the Bible is reliable. That was the message. Israel became a state, and their evangelical movements, Billy Graham, who's the guy out in Tulsa or somewhere? Oral Roberts, there are a bunch of guys like that preaching all over the place, and churches were filled up with people that believed. 1967, Israel took Judea, Samaria, and the charismatic movement broke out all over the country. And I became a believer in that wave. That was a long time ago. You can date me there. We used to go to meetings we lived in D.C. in the era, and we used to go to meetings, and there was Catholic priests, Episcopal priests, Baptist pastors, Methodists, all kinds of believers, every stripe and color you can think of, all standing together, worshiping in the Holy Spirit, just having a glorious time praising the Lord. Even Baptists. See, Jerry? See? So, I'll pick on Jerry tonight. Now that's kind of mellowed out a little bit over the years, but that's one of the wonderful things about fellowship. And so, no matter how tired you might become, or weary, or thinking, "Boy, I'm holding on. I'm just barely holding on." Just keep holding on. Persevere to the end, because this thing's coming, and when it does, you're in the prime position in all the world to do something about it. You already have a testimony grounded in the midst of Israel. And that's the wonderful thing about going there and working, because you build a testimony. It's wonderful. So, back and forth. All right. Now, I talked about Roswell. All of that stuff happened in the Bible in this small, maybe an area 30 miles wide. If you took off here and went down I-4 30 miles, how far would you get? Is that Disney? Is that 30 miles to Disney? So you get an idea that, and go about 90 miles. So if you went 90 miles up I-4, where would they get you that way? You would hit 95 and get to, you get maybe San Augustine. So you get a kind of an idea of the small. I one time calculated the acres. And as I recall, I was talking about Seminole, Orange, and parts of Osceola County. A tiny, tiny little area. And the Bible cites multiple over and over and over and over again of translations that went back and forth here. And it has all kinds of, God said, "I'll establish my name in this place until Mr. Trump is elected." No? How long? Forever. How long is that? It's a long. Now I heard a song one time by who's that singer? Can't think of his name. Country music. He was complaining about his former lover and wife had promised to love forever, and he said it sure turned out to be a short forever. Well, this one is not going to be a short forever. This is going to be a long forever. So God's establishing His name, has done it eternally at that place. So, okay. Now, I do all of that to jump into the area that we want to talk about tonight, and that is, I want to suggest that area is the most highly contested real estate in the world, no matter where you might be, and there's only one possible reason for that, and it's utterly and totally biblical and spiritual. No other reason for it. There's no significant natural resources outside of rocks there that I know of. The farmland's not that great. You could go to Iowa and find much better farmland. It's not militarily strategic. It's not some pass that you can't get through without conquering. It doesn't produce too much stuff, so there's no reason that it would be significant. And yet the whole world, the majority of UN actions deal with that issue. Can we now just think about that for a moment? A majority of UN activity is focused on that area and that issue, and the reason for that is because the Jewish people are in that land. Now, anytime historically when the Jewish people haven't been in control of that land, it's a sleepy little backwater place that nobody cares anything about. It's not even second thought. It doesn't have any relevance whatsoever. But let the Jewish people be there, and suddenly it is front burner stuff. In the past, whenever I've had groups in Israel, I have taken excerpts from Mark Twain's Innocents Abroad. And he traveled throughout the land. He specifically, various sites, identified where he was and described what he saw. And I like to take a bus, stop there, and just stand up and read what he saw and look out at what we see. And the land has come alive. And the truth is, the land will only bloom for the Israelis. Amen. It doesn't bloom for anybody else. Now you say, well, that's not good agriculture. It's just the way it is. Now, the Israelis' shoes didn't wear out for 40 years in the wilderness. Now, let me tell you another one. God made me rich. Same thing. God made me. I'm not Donald Trump, but he's got a place up north. I got a place up north. He's got a place in Florida. I got a place in Florida. They're not exactly the same, but the Lord has blessed. When I left engineering, I had people just begging me, "Oh gosh, don't! You're wasting your life." He has blessed in an incredible way. So God can do, and He will do, marvelous beyond our expectation. Amen. Marvelous beyond our expectation. Just believe that, and I'm giving testimony to it. I left engineering to come to be a pastor. My salary went well under half, and I'm worried because and actually they gained just a little bit today, but they've been losing some. I don't like to lose money. And see, stock market comes and it goes, and well, who gave it to me in the first place? See, all right, so the Lord did. So it's His money. He'll take care of me. So, okay. So, all right, that area is in continual conflict because of the promise of the Bible, the reality, the spiritual reality. The promise is that these things are going to be joined. They're going to be joined. And boy, will that upset the order here? That will upset the New World Order here pretty severely, do you think? Yep. This means cross-section, doesn't it? Two sets are overlapping, crossing, or something like that. It's been a long time. So, okay, you get the idea. So we're going to look at that. All right. I said go to this page. Let me look at this. I think we were talking. We find many examples of God, angels, humans crossing over from heaven to earth, from earth to heaven. These events in the Bible confirm the reality of a place called heaven. Okay, I call it a multidimensional space. Okay, it doesn't matter. The small area, central area, is the locale where these crossover events occurred, approximately 90 miles long, 30 miles wide. If we include Mount Sinai, we have to extend that about 200 miles. I don't know why God brought Israel to Mount Sinai and didn't bring them on in to, say, Mount Moriah to do the deal. And that's one of those real mysteries that that's going to be one of the first questions I ask Jesus when I see him face to face. Say, Jesus, it would have been a lot easier to teach that thing if you just brought it. But anyway, we'll see. Okay. Two sites within the area of most significance, Beit El. That's where the shooting was today, wasn't it? Beit El. I believe some folks were standing out waiting for a bus and drive by shooting. Beit El, and that's where Jacob took a nap at night when he was fleeing his brother, and he slept and he woke. He had a dream, and he said he saw a ladder from earth to heaven, and God standing at the head of the ladder, and the angels ascending and descending on the ladder. And he said, "This is Beit El, Beit house, El God, Beit El." And he said, "Is Sha'ar Hashemayim." I like that one even better. Sha'ar, the gate to Hashemayim, the heaven. The gate or gateway to heaven. And that's what Judea and Samaria represents, the gateway to heaven. I always talk about when Elisha saw God was standing on his front porch and dispersed those chariots of fire out on the mountains. Go out there, boys, and beef up Mr. Elisha. See what's going on. All right? And then the other one, of course, is Jerusalem, the Mount Moriah, the place where Abraham named the site. And I challenge the definition that's in most of our Bibles. It says, Adonai Yireh, Yud He Vav He Yireh. Ra'ah is the verb, it means to see. In this place, God will see. It's his front porch, of course. And he will be seen. It's his front porch, of course. Jerusalem, Bethel. You all go to those places. You've been there many times. And just on the east of Temple Mount is the Mount of Olives. And Ezekiel saw the vision of the glory of the Lord departing the temple and went across the Kidron and to the mountain, and we have no further record. His vision ended, but the glory must have ascended, did not just stay there. And then 600 years later, Jesus went from that area, crossed the Kidron Valley up on the Mount of Olives, and ascended in their sight and gave testimony to it. Same way. Promise he's coming back same way. Okay. So all these crucial areas. All right. I want to go now to our super slideshow. How about that? World empires. Now, maybe I got. Is it working? Decided not to work?
It's trying to. It's dinging you.
Come on. It may have, I just, inactive you mean? Have to, I do it that way. Okay. I'm backtracking just a little bit in the Bible, Genesis 10 and 11. The first mention of human empire, and it doesn't really call it that, but it's kingdom, same thing, in the Bible is Babel. And in Genesis 10, do I have that reference here? Whoops, going the wrong way. Yeah, 10:8, chapter 10, verses 8, 9, and 10, talking about this tyrant named Nimrod, and the beginning of his kingdom, empire, was Babel. And we all know that God came down looking at Babel, Genesis 11. Now we would say all of this would be from recorded history perspective prehistoric. So God came down and judged the situation at Babel, and he said they're in unity, they're in oneness, and nothing that they decide to do will be impossible. Everything's possible for them. This unity, not disunity, but the unity that they were in. I think they were in a dimension of unity that we hardly even know today. I think we have that possibility in Jesus when we come together to worship, but probably only at that situation, whatever the case. And so God hindered it. He stepped in and hindered it. He didn't just wipe it out. He hindered it. And how did he do it? He confused their language so that they couldn't understand one another. And so they became mutually repulsive to one another. One experience I've had over the years, if I find myself in a foreign nation where a language that I'm unfamiliar with is spoken, and say everybody's speaking that language and I don't know what it is, I not only do not understand, I am agitated. I am spiritually agitated by that phenomena, and I think it's a nature of the confusion that I think God made them mutually repulsive to one another, and now what did he tell them to do? Go out and fill the earth. And so they were repelled from one another, and they went out and did what he said in the first place. And so they went out, they scattered out, and the nations that we know came into existence at that point in history. And that's where history really, recorded history really starts. There is a theory that their language was unique. Something like telepathy. Is that a word? Telepathy. That perhaps the language that they spoke was more telepathy. I have to be really careful. Than language as we know it. And I don't know if that's true or not. But whatever the case, he confused them, and they spread out, and he interrupted human cooperation. They were coming under one authority as one, and by the way, that one authority was in absolute opposition to the will of God. Everybody, because God said, "Be dispersed and fill the earth," and they were doing this so that they would not be dispersed and would not. So we know it was in direct opposition to the will of God. If you could say what the will of God and planet Earth today, right this moment is, what would that be? The will of God concerning planet Earth at this instant in time, what would it be? And what would bring about redemption? What would be the next greatest step in redemption, you think? Jesus returning. And I think personally that the greatest, if we could define it, and now please don't understand, I'm not declaring that this is the case. I'm just saying that this is my opinion, that this would be the greatest. I mean, the Father is just, He's going to put all things under Jesus' feet, and when everything's under Jesus' feet, Jesus and all under him are going to come under the Father, that God may be all in all. We know that and so we think that would be it. Okay. But evidently, according to the will of God, there's some issues that has to be resolved before that happens. One of those issues is that the guardians, stewards of the land, have to be stewarding the land. Now, I say have to be, maybe that's a little tough, but I believe that's God's viewpoint. Maybe another possibility, I might suggest, another possibility is that real believers under Jesus' headship in real bodies of believers like fellowship will be so identified with the people of Israel that the living Jesus would be living right in the midst of Israel. In 2007, and Pastor Diaz gave testimony, and I get chills every time I think about it. Work, and there ain't no way we're ever going to see this water. And out of season rain filled the place. And the testimony went up in Jacob. This is a strange people. This is strange people. Something going on here. We're not quite sure. Now, maybe by now they're pretty sure. I think it may be. I think by now they're pretty sure. And how incredible is that? How incredible is that? How incredible is that? It's awesome. It's awesome. It's awesome. It's awesome. So, all right. So maybe the Father, maybe one of those preconditions is for the believers to really be girded up and standing in unity with God's people Israel. Maybe the two menorot are shining side by side. Revelation 11. Maybe. I don't know. You have to think about that and pray about it. Boy, it's worth thinking about and praying about, though, isn't it? It ought to get you excited enough to come ready to praise the Lord, huh? I mean, there's big doings in the making here, folks. Biggest doings that's ever happened on the planet. And I believe you're right in the midst of it. Up to your neck in it, so to speak. All right. Well, where did I get to anyway? What was I talking about? I was talking about something. Oh, okay. So God dispersed Babel because they were struggling against the will of God. Now, Babel, he didn't kill Babel because Babel has reemerged in every generation. Or the struggle to reestablish Babel has reemerged in every generation. Okay, let me go next. And so throughout the generation, nation states have arisen and tried to extend their influence beyond their boundaries, extended their military, their economics, their whatever, military-industrial complex mushroomed out and engulfed other nations, and Babel was ignited over and over and over again. And now, prior to the exile of Israel from the land of Israel in 586 BC, then you have nations like Egypt and ancient Babylon and Syria, whatever, that attempted to do these things. But of course, as long as Israel is controlling the land, then everybody's agitated and wants to get in on action. All of them attacking. All right, now, and I didn't talk about China because in this era, China is isolated. China is isolated by the Himalayas, the Gobi Desert, and the Pacific Ocean. So it historically is sort of boxed in. Now, in the last last 100, 150 years, it's broken out of that, of course, and today it's emerging. So it's no longer isolated, but in the biblical era, it was pretty much isolated. What was it, around 1000 AD that Marco Polo went into China for the first time? 1100, 1200, I don't remember what date it was exactly. All right, as a European going. All right, so now, after the exile, 586 BC, the Jewish people are swept out of the land. And so every empire has attempted to control the land and control it in such a way to avoid Israel being in the land in any kind of significant number. Now, the early empires weren't that bad in that regard. So we'll look at a couple of those. We'll consider Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome, Islam, and then up to the modern global empires. And one of the modern global empires is Islam. People don't think about it that way, but it is. All right. Now, according to Bible prophecy, the final struggle, we talk about the one world government or a restored Babel. It's just Babel coming back again. But ultimately, Babel... Now, remember, God confused their language, diminished their cooperation, and so they dispersed. And so mankind has been trying to overcome what the limits placed on them at Babel ever since that time. And so we're coming up now today in the world to working toward the idea of a global community. Is that true or not? There seems to be an irresistible trend in leadership, at least, to move in that direction. And so we find effort. Now I don't think we're very close to it yet. As a matter of fact, I think it'll take an international crisis to really push it together. You know what I think the international crisis will be? When the Jewish people says, this Temple Mount we consecrate to the Holy One of Israel and to none other. That, brothers and sisters, will be an international crisis. It'll turn the militaries up and put them together and bring them up. I think. Now, please understand, I'm not trying to prophesy. I'm just speculating. But I suspect something like that. We could have all kinds of natural stuff. You know, we have famines. We have tsunamis. We have all kinds of stuff that temporarily at least drive people together. But I think I can see this one coming. Okay, but the final event in this conflict is Babel and Jerusalem. Everybody can see that? Babel and Jerusalem. Now this is, how many people on the earth today? About 7 billion? 7 billion? How many people in Israel? 7 million? So let's just look at that. 7 times 10 to the 9 over 7 times 10 to the 6. And so that goes 10 to the 3. That's 7,000 to 1. The odds are not good, are they? But how about it? Now, let's stand over here with Elisha and look at this, see? You see what I mean? Stand over here with Elisha and say, and there's more with us than they are against us. You see Elisha's viewpoint here? Yeah, you have to see Elisha's viewpoint. And now the Israelis are very practical, aren't they? Who in the world is going to bring the concept of Elijah's viewpoint in the midst of Jacob? Who could possibly do that? Who could possibly be in a position to bring such a viewpoint to Jacob today? Well, Mr. Trump? No, I doubt it. He might be a friend, but I doubt it. Mr. Soros, maybe? No, not Mr. Soros. Well, who in the world could do such a thing? Pogo problem. We have met the enemy and he is us. That's our job. That's our job. And you go over and work at Kadimim, and the Lord stands up in the midst of you and does this stuff, and all of that is saying to Jacob, I believe Elisha is here. You see? The exact same spirit that operated in Elisha is operating in you. See, you need to believe that. Now, it's wonderful to see somebody healed from cancer or something like that, and that's a great miracle. But this is even greater. And you're up to your neck in it. All right, let's go on. Boy, that's pretty good music. Who you got playing there? Is that Merle Haggard?
The only ones you can hear in reverse.
That was Merle Haggard, by the way, about the short eternity. I'd slipped his name. Oh, Merle, he knows about eternity now, for good or bad. Okay, now we're going to look at a few of these empires. Well, it's already 8:30. I tell you what, let's take a quick break, and then we'll come back and roll through these. It won't take too long to do these empires, I think.
That's true, right? Well, you didn't make but one book. Look, look. Easy to run right now. Well, I think it's here. I know it's here. Enoch also was 7 from Adam. God saw the great saying, behold, the Lord cometh from 10,000 years. Well, and his return. Who's going to be with her? But where is he coming from? To heaven, to that? For us. And I actually no, let's think about that. Think about it. So here's Jesus. Do you think Peter was he actually comes out and he's yeah, John, Paul, and one of 10,000 of the saints. And John, I I didn't remember that particular reference. Do you think that would have anything to do with what do they call it in Revelation? Marriage supper? Have anything to do with them their company having marriage supper? I mean, the marriage supper would be the preparation for the marriage. Is how real head of those are already died, so he'll be caught up, and that will be supper. Next event is here. You know, I studied like I heard this from Pastor Roger. I studied the scripture, and those those that remain. Yeah. Okay. That word remain. Doesn't mean that I can't pronounce the word. Simultaneous. At the same time of the word simultaneous. Go together. Those that remain are those that have been left behind. That's what it actually says in the Greek. I studied it.
All right, look.
So think about this.
Well, hurry up and I'll get another cookie. I mean, we're down to cookies now.
Go get your cookies.
No, you go ahead.
I forgot where I was going now. I'll get it. Wow. Where is supper of the Lord? Somebody died. Laying on that sword, and he was talking about Peter and John, all being
did I get this thing?
I mean, I could have went out like something like a start this teaching. I could start this teaching and go on out and go off and because I got two revelations. I didn't do that. I would have a lot of things.
I never succeeded in that.
Nonsense about that.
Not very many have followed me.
That'll do it, Pastor. That does it every time.
They're giving free figs at the market. I heard that works. All right, we're going to look at some of these empires post-exile empires. Starting with Babylon. Babylon, 586 BC, took the last of Judea, Jerusalem, Judea, the remnant, took them into captivity. They destroyed the temple. Ezekiel had already seen the vision of the glory departing the temple. They destroyed Jerusalem, carried the people off into exile, took the king captive. So the Babylonians, the acts of the Babylonians appeared to declare that the word of God failed. That was a deliberate, purposeful thing. The word of God had failed. Many Israelis of that era declared that same thing. The word of God failed. Because there were false prophets saying, it can never happen to us because of so and so. And so that's when Jeremiah, who was an eyewitness of these events, declared, as long as you see the sun to come up in the morning and the moon to light the night, Israel shall be a nation before me forever, says the Lord. That's sort of long forever again, huh? So he declared that kind of. But from the Babylonian standpoint, they wiped it out. They were through with this God of Israel junk. Sick of it. They're up to their neck and neck. They were sick of it. And so they wiped her out. And Babylon was the dominant empire in the earth. And let me see if I can make this work. Babylon's here. Babylon was on the Euphrates. Baghdad is on the Tigris. They're about 50 miles apart, as I understand. I've never been there, so I don't know. Some of you may have been there in boots. I don't know. Anybody been there in boots? No? Okay. We need some young folks in here. So, anyway, Babylon took over the Assyrian Empire. It was centered at Nineveh. What's the Mosul? Mosul is the modern city where at Nineveh. Nineveh is the ancient ruins of Nineveh are on the outskirts of Mosul. Mosul was in the news a few years ago because ISIS controlled it for a year or two, and the Iraqi troops finally drove them out, I guess. All right, so that's the center of the Assyrian. The Babylonians rose up, kicked them out, and they conquered most of the ancient Assyrian Empire, including Israel. And they never totally conquered Egypt. Some of the Bible books going the wrong way. That's just another of the Babylonian Empire. And the dates there, 625 to 539 BC. 625 is when the Babylonian king Nabopolassar kicked off the Assyrian yoke, and in 612 they destroyed Nineveh and took over. So those are the basic, and by the 539 the Persians had taken them. The Bible books associated with the Babylonian era: Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Daniel, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Obadiah. Maybe another one, but I think that's the right ones. Okay. The Babylonian were Hamitic, Shemitic group. And so now, as was the Assyrians. And so the philosophy of those groups was that whenever they conquered a place, they just totally uprooted everything. And they took the leaders of a population center out and bring leaders from other populations and mix them. and they were incredibly cruel. They liked to take a rebellious city and kill all the men and behead them. That's a Middle Eastern tradition, you know. Behead them and build a pyramid of skulls outside the city gate. And that's just a testimony for anybody else that might decide they like to rebel a little bit. So I get your attention, I guess, right away. 70 or 80,000 skulls in a pyramid. So anyway, they were pretty ornery in that regard. You see remnants of that today, don't you? So anyway, so Babylon held on for actually a pretty short time. The first two leaders, Nabopolassar and Nebuchadnezzar, were the really efficient rulers, and after they died, they became fairly institutionalized and too rich and too fat and rich, and didn't take too long for the hungry Medes and Persians to arise and kick them where it hurts. All right, and then 539, the Medes and Persians arose and took over kicked out the Babylonians' oppression. Now there's this trend is. Let me back up just a hair. One of the things that seems evident is that with each succeeding empire, the situation in Israel gets much more difficult. And so the Persians, the center of Persia is ancient, or the modern state of Iran would be the heartland of ancient Persia. Notice they also are spreading out now. They captured Egypt and spread actually into Europe a little bit. They tried to get Greece, they never succeeded. And they're moving also eastward into India, Pakistan, into these areas. I assume this would be Afghanistan and Pakistan here. So the Persians went both ways. Huge empire. Excuse me. And the Persians were Japhetic. Now, most of you are Japhetic origin. And Japhetic mindset was notably different than the Semitic and Hamitic groups. And so the Persians, when they took the empire, they allowed each principality to establish its own religion and ethnic characteristics and language and so on. But they were overlords that controlled everything, above everything. So if you got out of line, they would slap you around. But they allowed semi-independence, and so it's under the Persians that we have in the books of Nehemiah and Ezra. A remnant is going back to Jerusalem and eventually rebuilding Jerusalem and the temple, and reestablishing Jewish life in the land of Israel. So many of the modern day settlers in Israel really identify with that group that went back there, because it very, very much parallels what they're doing today. So anyway, the Persians allowed that, and their empire spread out further, and they were much more efficient. So they held on for roughly 200 years. 200 years is usually a pretty good rule of thumb for a kingdom, for an empire. Now, notice that these guys are spreading out basically over the civilized world of their day. And they're in solid control of what's happening in Israel. Now, they did allow the Jewish people to go back. They actually sent them and protected them. So it was not as severe as subsequent ones. Okay. If anybody got comments or something to add to that, help yourself. I'm just speeding through. Okay. So some of the Bible books during the Persian Empire, Daniel lasted for a long time. Esther, Ezra, Nehemiah, Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi. Haggai and Zechariah showed up about 520 BC and prophesied concerning rebuilding the temple. Malachi would come along maybe 50 years later or so. We're not sure the exact date there. And he said, the temple's been built and you guys screwing it up, so get yourself squared away. And so we have those, and Ezra and Nehemiah are the historical books that document that. So the Persians, like any other group of people with an empire, they ate too many biscuits for breakfast, and they got overweight, and it's hard to chase an enemy when you're overweight. And that's what happens to them. They got a little bit overweight, and so eventually, and they tried real hard. Let me see if I can back it up. They tried real hard to get into Europe over here, and they whooped up on a lot of the Greeks here. In 490 at Marathon, and 480 at Salamis. Is that the word? I've forgotten the word. Something like that. Naval battle, I think. Here in the Aegean, I guess, and the Greeks whipped them down, and so they were never able to advance but they terrorized the Greeks for quite a while, and so 100 or so years later, Alexander returned the favor for him, and so Alexander's dad, Philip, organized Greeks. By the way, if you're flying to Israel, often you'll fly right over Greece. Anybody ever, you're really tired and sleepy and you hadn't had anything to eat for a long time, so you may not pay any attention. But if you look out the window, you'll see an incredibly mountainous, rough terrain. Very, very mountainous. The Greeks were almost impossible to organize, and in fact their Greek cities were built along the Aegean on both sides. So like Egypt was built along the Nile River here. Ancient Greece really was built as city-states around the Aegean, and there was commerce and traffic back and forth. But inland, you had to climb the mountains and whatever. It's very difficult. So the Greeks were always, as a result of that, incredibly self-reliant and independent. And so that's where American concepts really came from, is the Greeks in that time. So that's right. That's what good old John Wayne's supposed to be, self-reliant and independent as anything, to knock your head off if you disagree with him, right? Isn't that the image of John Wayne? So John Wayne movies are not popular anymore, I understand, because he's too much. What's the too macho? Toxic. That's the terminology. I don't know the modern terminology that way, but toxic masculinity. That's Mr. John Wayne. So don't be like John Wayne. There's a little guy that he's a real nerd. I think he's a queer that advertises telephones on, I think it's Verizon or something. Has his collar button, and it looks a little fruity, a little bit weenie type person. That's the anti-John Wayne that we have on the scene today. It's where our society is going. It's just, I mean, pardon? Wimps. Okay, yeah. Okay, It's hard for me to identify with that, but I don't know. That's where people. Okay, the Greeks were John Waynes. They were very independent, self-reliant, and they were individualistic because they were isolated, and there was no unity. So Philip actually brought them into unity, and then he died. I think his wife gave him bad biscuits, and he died, and his son Alexander, who's 20 years old, took his place. And the army was already prepared, so Alexander marched out of Greece and over and fought battle after battle. He came down to Jerusalem, turned around and headed east, and fought his way all the way into India, never lost a battle. The Persians, by this, they've been in power for 200 years. They weren't effective fighting force, and so see. 1776, 1876, 19... Okay, I'm just thinking. Just thinking. Okay, now the Persians fell, and so we come up with the Greek Empire. And notice that the Greeks now, they're expanding here into Europe and Egypt, North Africa, and again, all the way, whoa, I went backward a few steps. Let me go forward. You push the wrong button and things happen. And so they went all the way into India. So now, this was the last truly one world effort at Babel. This was the last one under Alexander that historically appeared. Because now this is my rule of thumb, and so you'd have to talk to a real historian to really get a real feel for the thing. But my rule of thumb is that for empires in this era, if you go out about 1,000-mile radius, that's about the maximum that you can maintain communications and logistics with an army. And if you go any further, you just somehow lose. I mean, how long does it take to get from the Euphrates to Rome? I mean, for example, the very quickest that you could get, I guess, would be horseback, and that's a long haul. So communication becomes increasingly difficult. Logistics become increasingly difficult, and so in that era, I think the extent of empire. So the Greeks took over. The Greeks took over Jerusalem early on, and the Seleucid kingdom and the Ptolemy kingdom in Egypt, Seleucid in Syria and Iraq, battled back and forth to see who was going to control. But they controlled the Israelis. There was a remnant in Israel, maybe a million or so Israelis in the land in this area. They're under Greek rule, but they did their thing. They did all right, but they were dominated. So as long as Satan is in control of the land, and it's clear to everybody, he seems to be fairly content. All right. So as soon as Alexander died, he died at 30 or 32. I think he was 32 maybe. He died, and the kingdom subdivided, and we're going to end up with the two primary ones relative to Israel is the Seleucid kingdom up here and the Ptolemy kingdom here. And so the Bible, there's various extra biblical books. We're interested, I'm interested particularly in the Maccabees. It would have been from this era. And there are various other extra biblical books that would be associated with it, but that's the only ones that I'm aware of or use. So the Greeks did like everybody else that runs the empire. They lasted about 200 years. And along came Rome. And so the Romans gradually overrun the Greek Empire. They took over the Greek homeland by about 200 BC, and just step by step they took over the Seleucid kingdom in 64 BC, and then the Ptolemy Empire in 30 BC. So you can see they just gradually overrunning the Greeks. When Anthony married Cleopatra, is that right? Anthony? Is that the guy's name? Anthony? Who played him in the movie? Was that Richard Burton? Richard Burton. Well, he was a loser that time. So Cleopatra, we think she's an Egyptian, but she's Greek. You need to think about it in that sense. She's a Greek. Yes, sir. Jerry. I'm the seventh one, but of Greek heritage. Yeah. Okay. So they're from that heritage. So with the demise of Cleopatra and the war Augustus Caesar. What was his name before? Octavian. Octavian battled Anthony and prevailed. She bit the snake or something, and that was it. And so the last of the Greek empires folded 30 BC. So it's all Rome now. Now, the interesting thing about the Roman Empire is that, notice it extends, this is the Euphrates and the Tigris. It extended over basically to the Euphrates, and that's as far as you can get. That's his 1,000-mile limit, see? Now, to the east, a new empire emerges, and called the Parthian Empire, which would be Iran and Afghanistan, Pakistan, I suppose, whatever. A nation. I backed up again. So at the time of Jesus, there were actually east-west split, and the efforts at Babel was divided east and west, and we're still working on that today, don't we? Still that way today, and it's going to take something incredible to overcome that. But now today we're not limited to 1,000 miles, are we? Anybody remember Desert Storm? That was, oh God, was that 30 years ago? Is that possible? Was that 30 years ago? I can't believe it. 30 years ago. Well, this is almost 20 and it was 90. Yeah, you guys are a lot older than you think. 30 years ago. Listen. Support Jesus. He supports you. I went down to the VA and had a physical not too long ago, and the doctor said, I'm not sure, I'm going to send you down to, I'm not sure about your heart. I'm going to send you down and get some sort of test on you. So I went down, Joe and I went down. We almost got to Miami and found the VA center. Yeah, it's just north Miami, I think. So we and the young man checked my heart out. He did some sort of echo thing or something. I don't know what it was. Did something like that. And he says, "Mister, you got a heart of a 21-year-old." I said, so I'm going to blame that on Jesus. Blame it on Jesus. I can do roofs now. See, I've got a 21-year-old heart. I'm back on the roof. No. Okay. So this 1,000 miles, and remember that's my real rough gauge, but something like it had to be taken effect because you can expand the army just so long. So the Romans went all the way over in the Mediterranean to the Spain, encircled the whole Mediterranean. It was a Roman sea, and over here is over here is Parthian Empire, east-west thing. And so the Romans, you know about the Romans' interaction with Israel. And so just shortly after, now I think, now everybody's got their own theory about this, but God sent a remnant back to the land, the ones recorded in Ezra and Nehemiah, and that remnant stayed in the land long enough, about 500 years, maybe 6, close to it. They stayed in there long enough that the Messiah was born and brought forth, and the ladder that we talked about was being rebuilt and established long enough for that to get its feet on the ground, and then that people were fanned out once again. If we look at the book of Revelation chapter 12, it says the earth helped the woman because the enemy was furious, and he was going to destroy her, and the earth helped her, and meaning that the Jewish people were fanned out all over the earth. So even though he was effective at any one given place, he wasn't effective in all. And the Holocaust of our generation, in the modern era, was the most effective effort at it. And about a third of the Jewish population of the world was destroyed in the Holocaust. I'm not sure that's a good number, but I think it's pretty close. I think it seemed like I've read that somewhere, but I don't know. A huge number. And of course, the Jewish people are still staggering from their experience of the Holocaust. That's deep within their mentality. Okay, so hence the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire lasted, it went 200 years, blew that one. The western portion went out of it. The northern tribes, Germanic tribes, invaded and overtook them by about 476 A.D., I think is the date of the surrender of anybody know who surrendered Rome to the Germans? The Pope. The Pope did. He was the official of Rome at that time. So so the eastern Greek-speaking portion of the ancient Roman Empire, the so-called Byzantine Empire, held on until 1453. So they really held out there for a while. And they were thoroughly in control of the land of Israel. Jews were swept out of there. No big danger here, no big threat. And so the next empire that we would look at, by the way, the New Testament was written during the Romans, of course. The next empire sprang out of the Arabian desert in this area. And at about I'll just say 630, 630 A.D. Under the leadership of Muhammad, came up out of the Arabian desert and started conquering and devouring. And now this brings us up to the present almost, but so the whole northern tier of African states, the whole Middle East, all the way up into the former Soviet Union, those Soviet states, parts of India, Indonesia. Islam is huge, and I believe personally that they're on the verge of overrunning Europe, and I'll tell you a little something now. You wouldn't believe this, but Elizabethtown, Kentucky has got mosques in it. That was the hard part. I mean, I knew Orlando. Obviously, Orlando is sort of an international city. You'd kind of halfway expect it. We got back to Kentucky, and we see people, the women in their, what do they call them? Hijab, whatever it is. Burqa. Yeah, burqa. There are some ladies I like to see in burqas, but most I don't. So I probably shouldn't have said that. So anyway, you wouldn't believe it, but here we're talking about rural Central America. Gosh, it's hard for us to believe, but there they are. There they are. So they're everywhere. Yes, sir.
Recent study come out, there are more Muslims in the United States than are Methodists.
More, well, those Methodists, you have to watch them, though. I don't doubt it's a growing, and you know, as long as the borders are wide open, they're multiplying every day, coming like crazy. So it's a crazy thing. And if you want to see the end result of that, just all you have to do is look at France, look at Britain, and Germany. Pardon? And they invited them. I guess we did too. You and I didn't. But Obama did. He certainly did. So crazy. Anyway, Islam. Now Islam took the first area outside the Arabian Peninsula that Islam grabbed was Israel. And I wrote in the little write-up in your booklet, this is Satanic's grasp for control of the land of Israel. There are various doctrines of Islam that that says that, number one, Islam must be exhibited as superior to any other religion. In other words, if they capture an area, a church in a captured Muslim area where Muslim is captured, the steeple of the church can't be higher than the minaret. Is that what they're called? The little thing where they scream, or the synagogue or so on. Christians and Jews can live in a Muslim land, but they live in what's called dhimmi status, which means that they're subjected under Muslim rule. And so in the old days, if you're walking down the sidewalk, you know, in the old days the sidewalk was wood and the mud outside, and you're Jewish or you're Christian walking down that, and you meet a Muslim, you step off in the mud and he walks down the and churches and synagogues basically are not repaired, so over a period of time they did disintegrate and whatever. So dhimmi status. There's a book called Dhimmis by Bayat Yor, something like that. I've got a reference in your book, I think, somewhere on the. So she grew up. She's Jewish. She grew up in North Africa somewhere, I believe, and Egypt, maybe, I'm not sure. And she writes about dhimmi status. It's worth reading. So Islam must be declared. Another thing about Islam is that anytime an area is militarily overrun by Islamic forces, it becomes a part of what is the homeland of Islam, the domain of Islam. In Arabic, it's Dar al-Islam, the domain of Islam. And no area that has become a part of Dar al-Islam can ever be anything but Dar al. In other words, it can never be liberated. It's always going to be, from Muslim perspective, Dar al-Islam. The other, anything that in the world that's not Dar al-Islam is Dar al-Harb, the domain of war. And the Dar al-Harb is being diminished and converted into Dar al-Islam until Islam prevails over the whole world. And you can see how well they're doing. Pretty good. See? And this doesn't show the U.S., and it really doesn't show them in Europe that much, but we know that in just the last several years, this has radically changed. And so there are areas in both London and Paris that the French or British police won't go because there is another law there. And so they're not just another. I guess Dearborn would be the same thing. And it's coming to a town near you. Yeah. Yes, sir.
You're saying that Islam, just like Rome
Sure.
Okay. Now, I just want to ask you something, okay? Okay, you said the year the Roman Empire ended, according to which is 1453 AD.
Yes.
Okay, so are you saying that was when Islam conquered the Roman Empire?
Yes, it pushed the out of Constantinople. It became Istanbul. And so what was the heartland of the Eastern Roman Empire, like in what is Greece and Turkey and so on, was overrun by the Muslims, and they advanced into where we at? They advanced into Europe. But then they advanced into Europe, both here and in Spain, and this was, what years are we talking about now? I'm not sure now. All of a sudden, my history is evading me. But I'm not talking 1,000, 1,100, 1,200 A.D. I'm not sure that they were turned back both in Spain from further advance into Western Europe and in the Balkans from advancing that way. So that has just recently been overturned with the influx of Muslims. So there's a tremendous influx of Muslims into all of Europe now, as it is in the United States. So I don't know. Perhaps in the book of Revelation, when we look at the prophecies concerning a false prophet, that perhaps the false prophet could be seen to be Islam.
Could be the beast.
Well, the false prophet is distinct from the beast. Pardon? Revelation 5, the pale horse is one of the four horsemen that you're talking about. What happened with the pale horse? Warfare? No.
I've heard different translations should be, instead of pale, should be green as opposed to pale.
Greed? Green. Oh, Islam. Okay, I don't know. I just don't know. Pardon? Yeah, something like the pale, the sickly. What's the color? Is pestilence and whatever, all above. Maybe, I don't know. So therefore, but in the now there are two visions in Revelation. One goes from chapter 6 to 11, and another one goes to 13 through 20, I guess, 19. Yeah, and so the false prophet appears, the so-called beast and the false prophet appears in that latter portion, 13 through 17. So that's what I was trying. I'm not sure. The false prophet had two horns, and so you can look at this stuff and Jesus said, "I've told you these things so that when they happen, you will recognize what it is." And so it's worthwhile to look at and think about, but don't get too unnerved with it. Wait till its full manifestation, and you'll know exactly what it is. So there's you see the darker area here in this map. This is Shia, and this is the light green is Sunni. About 85 to 90% of Muslims are Sunni. 10 to 12 or so, I'm not sure exact percent, something like that, is Shia. The center of Shia Islam is India, Iraq. I'm sorry, I'll get there eventually. Iran. The guys that, and we talk about I don't know, Mr. Obama, cogs weren't working, I don't know. Either he's an ultimate traitor, maybe he's just stupid. I don't think so, but I don't know. But to act in such a way as to attempt to encourage or equip state like Iran with weapons of mass destruction, namely nuclear weapons, is lunacy.
So he thinks he's going to rule after all.
Maybe he does. Maybe but that would render him stupid. And you said he wasn't. So
Because he's already built his palace.
there must be a rationale. But it evades me totally. It evades me. So if I have a cage on my porch and it's all got rattlesnakes in them, and I can't do anything about that, the best I do is leave them alone. I'm not going to feed them. I'm not going to put mice out there so they can eat them. So, it appears utterly irrational in any way I look at it. So I know that he must be looking at it from a totally different.
Yeah, and France and Germany and Greece or Italy and some of the other countries that are in Europe are fighting to be able to trade.
Yeah, but they always have this standby. If they get too deep into it, who's going to stand up and help them?
The day after the deal was signed, Europe sent a large contingency
Yeah.
of defense contractors and
And so Iran now has missiles that could pepper Europe, and by golly, they will. So, and who do you suppose will likely be called upon to bail them out if such a thing were to develop? Who would go? We will. We've done it in the past. We'll do it again. I guess. I don't know. All right. Now, remember now, the first country that Islam captured outside the Arabian Peninsula was the land of Israel. Now, Islam has held Israel under its control for 1,300 years. And as long as it was in control, everything's sleepy and nobody cares. Nobody read Mark Twain's Innocent Abroad. He describes it. And then, now, somewhere, if you look at Bible prophecy, somewhere you think that God flips a switch or something, and things start pulling together. And that happened in the 20th century. Actually, it started in the late 19th, but it really got underway in the 20th century. So God started the promise from the Bible of in gathering his people back into the land. So I'm take a chance. Jeremiah 30 verse 9. That's a chance. I hope it hit something there. It's probably sat under the fig tree and died or something. Who knows?
But they shall serve the Lord their God. And David 13.
No, it's the wrong one. I'm looking for the one that says, "He that scattered Israel will regather him." I don't know. I was thinking it doesn't matter where it's at. He said it, but it's there. So I think somewhere along the end of the 18th century and beginning of the 19th century, God began to ingather the Jewish people back into the land, the modern Zionist movement. You all know all about that. And there was a gradual buildup of Jewish presence in the land. In that same era, the advent of modern one world governments started emerging in a serious effort. What's 3010?
30:10.
What? Well, that sounds pretty good. It's not what I had in mind, but I like it. 31:10. Oh, I missed it. 31:10. See, when you get older, stuff goes. There's various things goes. Memory is just one of them. 30. Okay. All right. So with the ingathering of the Jewish people into the land, and a few now in 1918, at the climax of the World War I, the so-called League of Nations came into existence, an effort at global government. The League of Nations, Mr. Wilson designed it and emphasized it, but the Congress said we don't have none of that, so the United States never joined it, I think. But at the end of the World War II, now the Jewish population continues to build, and in World War II, the United States designed the United Nations, and everybody joined it, especially the United States, and so we're still playing with that effort at global government. Not very efficient yet, but it'll get there. It'll be there when it needs to be. Okay. So at the same time, then, the Jewish population growing in the land, and in the aftermath of the Holocaust in 1948, enough of 750,000 Jews in the land of Israel, they declared their independence. Israel became a state under Jewish, and this here's what it looks like. Oops. I missed 2 or 3 slides. That's all right. We already talked about it. There's what it looks like. When God brought Israel into the land, it was like he took a spear and speared the dragon. And what we're seeing today is that dragon is thrashing around, but he's dead. He's dead. He's thrashing around like crazy, but he's dead. Because he cannot survive with Jerusalem in Jewish control and glorifying and magnifying the God of the Bible. So I believe that's where we are current events right now. And he's thrashing about trying to bring himself back. But Elisha's vision is working. Elisha's vision is working. You all heard the testimony of Gershon Solomon all years and years ago. On the Golan Heights, thought he died surrounded by Syrian troops that were going to kill him a second time, and all of a sudden they turned and run. And they saw what Elisha saw, and he gave testimony to that. He didn't see it; they saw it. It's coming. It's coming. So Satan is desperate to control, first and foremost, the Temple Mount. Secondly, Jerusalem. Thirdly, Judea and Samaria. Fourthly, the land in general. And so Israel has the land in general. They basically, I hear reading all the time about annexing Judea and Samaria. It's just a matter of time. It's a horrible price to pay. Drive-by shootings, Israelis getting killed. But it will come to annexing Judea and Samaria. And one day, when you go up to the land of Israel with a group, you will be invited to stand on the Temple Mount and praise the awesome one in Messiah Jesus. Because you already have a testimony. You already built it. Daniela Weiss, Rabbi Wallman, and all the guys that you know. Haniel, is that his name? Haniel, what is his name? He'll grab you by the arm and let's go up on the Temple Mount and worship the Holy One. That's what they'll say. Because they will have consecrated it. And the beast is going to go crazy. The dragon is thrashing about, trying to come back to life, trying to get in control. He's not, he's dead. He's dead. He's dead. It's going to happen, folks. So don't grow weary, even though I get old and weary. Don't you? Don't grow weary. He that began a good work in you will complete it until the day of the Lord. And at that day, it'll be completed. See? These are not fairy tales that we're talking about. That's what the guy said about the resurrection. Maybe it's a fairy tale. No, he stood right in the room with us. Amen. All right. Next, we're going to skip a week or two in order to honor the holidays. Holy days, holidays. Whatever you like to call them days. As for me and my house, I will serve the Lord. All right. That'll be good. January the 3rd. January the 3rd, we should be back in business. Okay? Pray for us in the morning. We're going to drive, take a